Good afternoon. We're coming on the air right now with breaking news in the impeachment of President Trump. That is the scene in the Rayburn Room of the U.S. Capitol right now, where in just moments, the House Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, is going to come in that room for what is called an engrossment ceremony. She is going to sign the resolution authorizing the appointment of House managers to prosecute the case of President Trump in a Senate trial and to authorize the transmittal of the articles of impeachment to the Senate for the trial. She will be joined by her House managers, we expect, and they will walk the message over as we see the House Speaker now coming in, flanked by her lead manager, Adam Schiff, the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, Jerry Nadler, also the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, Richard Neal, the Speaker.
Good afternoon, my colleagues. As you know, on December 18th, the House of Representatives upheld its constitutional duty and voted articles of impeachment against the President of the United States, Donald Trump. He said in the course of the debate that he did not uphold his oath of office to protect, preserve, and defend the Constitution of the United States. The President takes a special oath, a little different from the congressional oath. In fact, he takes an oath that was taken by President George Washington, the patriarch of our country, in front of whose picture we stand here. So sad, so tragic for our country that the actions taken by the President to undermine our national security, to violate his oath of office, and to jeopardize the security of our elections, the integrity of our elections, has taken us to this place. So today, we will make history. When the managers walk down the hall, we will cross a threshold in history, delivering articles of impeachment against the President of the United States for abuse of power and obstruction of the House. As we make that history, we will be making progress for the American people. Progress in support of our Constitution, progress in honor of the sacrifice and the vision of our founders, progress in honor of the sacrifice of our men and women in uniform, and progress for the future of our children. Make it be very clear that this President will be held accountable, that no one is above the law, and that no future president should ever entertain the idea that Article 2 says that he can do whatever he wants. And so with that, I will sign the resolution transmitting the articles of impeachment to the Senate, which will be delivered by our managers, of whom I'm very proud. When they bring this over, we'll set in motion a process on the Senate side. Probably tomorrow. I don't know their schedule, but it may be as soon as tomorrow. The senators will take an oath of office. They will take a special oath of office to do impartial judges and do impartial justice according to the Constitution and the laws. Let's hope that they uphold that oath that they take tomorrow. And so now I'm very honored to be here with our six chairmen who worked so hard to help us uphold the Constitution with their legislating, their investigating, their litigating. You know, the chairman of the Judiciary Committee is part of the managers, Jerry Nadler, Mr. Schiff, the distinguished chairman of the Intelligence Committee, House Select Committee on Intelligence, Congresswoman Maxine Waters, the chair of the Financial Services Committee, Congresswoman Carolyn Maloney, Madam Chair of the Oversight Committee, Congressman, Mr. Chairman, Elliot Engel of the Foreign Affairs Committee, and Richie Neal, Chairman of the Ways and Means Chairman of the Ways and Means Committee. We thank them for all of their difficult work, and we honor our darling Elijah Cummings, who said, when one day we were dancing with the angels, what would we say about what we did? at this difficult time in our country's history. And then I'm very proud that Mr. Nadler and Mr. Schiff are part of our managers, but I want to acknowledge our other managers who are with us, a freshman member, but I shouldn't say freshmen. These, they've been here 1 year, accomplished great things. Congressman Jason Crow of Colorado. Where are we? Congresswoman Val Demings of the state of Florida. Congresswoman Garcia of Texas. Were we all here? Where's Hakeem? Hakeem is our distinguished chair of our caucus. Hakeem Jeffries of New York. Is that everybody? And Zoe Lofgren. This is Zoe's third impeachment. She was for the Nixon impeachment, she was a staffer for a Judiciary Committee member, Don Edwards of California. She was a member of the Judiciary Committee on the Clinton impeachment, in her own right, a member of the Judiciary Committee, and now a member of the Judiciary, chair of House Administration, which oversees elections, important to all of this, and a manager. So with that, I thank them all for their leadership and their service, and I'm now going to proceed to sign the articles.
Speaker said it. Today we will make history, and that's what she's about to do by signing this resolution. You see she's got an array of pens there, likely one for each of the managers, who will then carry over the message to the Senate and the articles of impeachment to be deliberated on, starting, as she said, as early as tomorrow in the Senate. Mary Bruce up there on Capitol Hill as we watch the Speaker. She said she is setting in motion a series of events that she started back in September. It was her decision that she held back on for quite some time moving forward on impeaching President Trump. But as she signs this resolution, it is now out of her hands.
Yeah, George, this is now what we are witnessing, the historic handoff. The Speaker now signing off and sending over the articles of impeachment. And then, as you mentioned, you will see the House managers, those 7 members of Congress that will now be leading, that will be prosecuting the case against the president in the Senate. And they're going to make a walk that most of us make every single day. It's about a 2.5-minute walk across the Senate, across the Capitol to the Senate. But, George, we haven't seen a walk like this in 21 years, delivering the articles of impeachment to the Senate. And by handing this over, we are now entering the next phase. This is the end of the phase in the House, the end after a month of delay of an impasse, but it also marks the beginning of the next phase of yet another intensely bitter partisan battle in the Senate, as Donald Trump is now becoming just the 3rd president in American history to face a trial in the Senate.
Only the 3rd time, but there is some precedent and some rules that the Senate and the House will be following as the Speaker continues to sign. And Terry Moran, let me bring you in on this as well. One of the rules is that the managers can't actually come over until the Senate accepts the articles and then formally invites them to make the presentation, which is likely to happen as early as tomorrow afternoon. And one of the questions going forward is, what impact will all this ritual have on the senators as they make these deliberations?
That's a great question, George. We live in a time where lofty political ideals and practices seem to have gone by the wayside temporarily, one hopes. But this process we're looking at right now, the signing, the engrossment, to use the ancient term of finalizing a legal document, that is part of the process, part of these rituals that in part are meant to elevate the debate, elevate the responsibilities, the sense of responsibility that members and senators have. The process reminds me a little bit of the state opening of Parliament in London, when the Lords walk across the House of Parliament to the House of Commons and are refused entry, the door slammed in their face by the Master of Arms there, a statement of the independence of the House of Commons from the House of Lords. Something similar here.
Similar, although the Senate does not have that option, I think, to slam the door in the face of the managers. But Dan Abrams, I want to bring you in on this as well. The Speaker noted that oath that the senators are going to take, a separate oath from the one they take when they're sworn into office to impartial justice. Once they take that oath, they're not exactly jurors, but they're not exactly senators either.
Right. There's something in between. That's it.
Speaker's handing out the pens. to each of her managers, as we said. Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah. So I was saying that it is somewhere in between in terms of the role of the Senate here. It is not a true comparison to a trial. The rules that apply to jurors don't apply to senators. The Chief Justice is not going to instruct them at the end of each day, please do not read any coverage about the case, as a judge would in a high-profile trial. And remember, of course, that it is the Senate that will be able to ultimately vote on the legal rulings to decide what sorts of questions can be asked. Can witnesses be called? All the fundamental questions that typically be ruled on by a judge may or may not initially be ruled on by Chief Justice Roberts.
They are part judges, they are part jurors, they are part senators. It's a political process with legal overtones as well. And John Carl, I want to bring you in on this as well. We heard from the White House today they want and expect this to go very, very quickly. They lose a bit of control once this goes to the Senate as well.
They sure do. The White House still hasn't formally announced who will be arguing the case for the president, but they did talk to reporters today, looking forward to the trial, anticipating a trial that would be about 2 weeks. Of course, George, if the Senate votes to have witnesses as part of this trial, that timeline could be considerably longer, but they are prepared for what they believe will be a quick trial, essentially the presentation of the arguments by the House managers, the defense by the White House lawyers, and then ultimately a vote on acquittal or removal.
And we still haven't seen, John, because we haven't seen Senator McConnell's resolution, which also has to be voted on early next week once the Senate constitutes itself for the trial, and on what kind of time frame he is going to send out, what kind of rules he is going to apply, whether or not he's going to include, as the president wants, a motion to dismiss the trial.
He has not revealed that yet. He has said that he would like to use the model from the last impeachment trial, 1999 trial of Bill Clinton, but he has not revealed exactly what he wants to do. I interviewed today George Trent Lott, who was in McConnell's shoes 21 years ago with the impeachment trial of Bill Clinton, and he suggested that even in this acrimonious time, that it was important that McConnell should reach out to the Democrats. There should be some agreement, at least on procedure, to start this, as there was 21 years ago.
Well, not only was it an agreement, it was a 100-0 vote, Terry Moran, last time. That was seen at the time as something of a partisan trial, but so different from one we're expecting to see, at least at the start. Here at the time, President Clinton was facing some trouble among Democrats, and they did come to some agreement with the Republicans on the rules for this trial, a bipartisan agreement together as a body. That is unlikely to happen here.
It sure is. 100-0 vote in the United States Senate on an impeachment trial, on the procedures. Can you imagine that here? You can't, in part because of the changing times, as we keep saying, but also this case is different. This impeachment case is different. In the Clinton case, the facts were accepted. The relevant facts were accepted. The question is, what did they mean? Did they rise to the level of impeachment? It's one of the reasons they didn't feel the crushing need to call witnesses. They were embarrassed, I think, by some of the nature of the testimony of Bill Clinton's relationship with Monica Lewinsky, but also they basically all agreed what had happened. He had an affair and lied about it under oath. Here, President Trump is offering an entirely different factual universe about what from what the impeachment is about, from what the Democrats think it's about. They think that the transcript of that call, the testimony of witnesses, shows that he was abusing his office, using the powers of the office for his own personal political gain. He's saying, no, he was investigating corruption. He wants, if they're going to call witnesses, Hunter Biden and maybe Joe Biden, who knows, in the well of the Senate answering questions. So we have a very different case here. It's going to be much more contentious because the very facts, what this thing is about, is at issue.
And one of the arguments, Dan, the Democrats are making is that you need more documents and more witnesses to establish that case. They say there's enough in their mind to impeach right now, but more evidence, new witnesses would bolster that case. There have been witnesses in every other impeachment trial.
Right, and I think that, you know, as they move forward here, one of the key questions, of course, is going to be how much new evidence is there, if any? Because as we talk about this all the time, we say, well, we knew that. What's new here? What didn't we know? And I think that's the only way Democrats have even a shot of moving any needles in the Senate is if they've got something new. Now, they can make an argument that, like in a trial, in a regular criminal trial, if you get new evidence during the trial, you present it. Yes, you have to share it with the defense, but you end up presenting it. And particularly in high-profile cases, we see a lot of the time evidence coming in at the last minute.
And it appears the managers now are making their way across the Capitol right now, approaching the Senate doors. The articles are being held, the message is being held by the House clerk. Cheryl Johnson, she's joined by the House Sergeant at Arms, Paul Irving. She's actually carrying those articles, and she will be met by the Secretary for the Majority, Leader Mitch McConnell, Laura Dove, who will accept that message from the Senate. And then, as I said, what we expect to happen after that is the Senate will formally take that message and then basically invite the managers back to present their case tomorrow, likely around noon. Tomorrow, which will actually be the formal presentation of the articles. In fact, we expect that the lead House manager, Adam Schiff, would actually be reading those articles in the Senate tomorrow. But this slow walk now being made across the Capitol, that is usually a very bustling hallway, full of tourists, full of staffers, full of reporters, emptied out now as the House managers and the House employees make that walk to the Senate door to present the articles of impeachment.
And I think the Democrats really do want to elevate the ceremonial aspect of this as much as possible. Terry mentioned this before. Remember, the strategy, at least from House Republicans very often, was to treat this like a joke. This is a circus, this is a hoax. The president has made the same sort of references. From the Democrats' perspective, this is a somber day, this is a sad day, this is an important day. And I think that as we see the trial proceed, you are going to see formalities. You're going to see the senators stand when the Chief Justice enters. You're going to see them refer to him as Mr. Chief Justice. You're going to see them sit at an appropriate time.
They don't speak, they write out their questions.
Exactly. And I think all of that will work from a sort of visual perspective to the Democrats' advantage. Now, is that going to somehow change the outcome? No. But I think that does give the visual that I don't think the president wants, which is that this is a serious proceeding that people are taking seriously.
They've just made their way through the Capitol Rotunda, now on the Senate side of the Capitol. John Carl, one of the other questions is, will the senators take the opportunity to go behind closed doors and deliberate among themselves without any cameras present?
And that is exactly what led to that 100-0 vote that we were talking about earlier. Is all 100 senators went into what's called the old Senate chamber, which they just passed the door to, and they went in there. Not only no press and no cameras, George, but not a single staff member. It was just the senators themselves. They went into the room, deeply divided on how to proceed with the Senate, and they came out with that agreement 100-0, largely led by two of the most prominent and most ideological members of the Senate at the time. Ted Kennedy, the great liberal, Phil Gramm, a great conservative, agreed on almost nothing. The two of them were the ones who came up with that agreement in that meeting.
There we see the House clerk has now made it to the Senate door.
Mr. President, I have been directed by the House of Representatives to inform the Senate the House has passed H.Res. 798, a resolution appointing and authorizing managers for the impeachment trial of Donald John Trump, President of the United States.
The message will be received.
Senator Chuck Grassley, President Pro Tem of the Senate, senior Republican, not the Republican leader, but the senior Republican, as the articles are handed over, the message is handed over. Mary Bruce, as we keep an eye on this, give us a sense of the mood up there in Capitol Hill.
The Majority Leader.
It is quite an unusual scene. Oh, and here you have the Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell.
Of the rules and procedure and practice when sitting on impeachment trials, the Secretary of the Senate informed the House of Representatives that the Senate is ready to receive the managers appointed by the House for the purpose of exhibiting articles of impeachment against Donald John Trump, President of the United States, agreeably to the notice communicated to the Senate. Further, that at the hour of 12 noon on Thursday, January 16, 2020, the Senate will receive the managers on the part of the House of Representatives in order that they may present and exhibit the articles of impeachment against Donald John Trump, President of the United States.
Is there any objection? If not, so ordered.
I ask unanimous consent that pursuant to Rules 3 and 4 of the Rules of Procedure and Practice when sitting on impeachment trials, that at the hour of 2 p.m. on Thursday, January 16, 2020, the Senate proceed to the consideration of the articles of impeachment, and that the presiding officer, through the Secretary of the Senate, notify the Chief Justice of the United States of the time and place fixed for consideration of the articles and request his attendance as presiding officer pursuant to Article 1, Section 3, Clause 6 of the U.S. Constitution.
Is there any objection? So ordered.
I ask unanimous consent that the presiding officer be authorized to appoint a committee of senators, 2 upon the recommendation of the majority leader and 2 upon the recommendation of the Democratic leader, to escort the Chief Justice into the Senate chamber. I further ask consent that the Secretary of the Senate be directed to notify the House of Representatives of the time and place fixed for the Senate to proceed upon the impeachment of Donald John Trump in the Senate chamber.
Is there any objection? If not, so ordered.
I ask unanimous consent that access to the Senate wing, the Senate floor, and the Senate chamber galleries during all of the proceedings involving the exhibition of consideration of the articles of impeachment against Donald John Trump, President of the United States, and all times that the Senate is sitting in trial with the Chief Justice of the United States presiding, be in accordance with the allocations and provisions I now send to the desk, and I ask that it be printed in the record.
Is there objection? If not, so ordered.
I ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to the consideration of SRS 471 submitted earlier today.
The clerk will report.
Senate Resolution 471, authorizing the taking of a photograph in the chamber of the United States Senate.
Is there objection to proceeding to the consideration? Without objection, then the Senate will proceed.
I ask unanimous consent the resolution be agreed to and the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate.
Without objection, so ordered.
Now, Mr. President, for the information of all senators, a few minutes ago, the Senate was notified that the House of Representatives is finally ready to proceed with their articles of impeachment. So by unanimous consent, we have just laid some of the groundwork that will structure the next several days. We've officially invited the House managers to come to the Senate tomorrow at noon to exhibit their articles of impeachment. Then later tomorrow afternoon at 2 p.m., the Chief Justice of the United States will arrive here in the Senate. He will be sworn in by the President pro tem, Senator Grassley. Then the Chief Justice will swear in all of us senators. We'll pledge to rise above the petty factionalism and do justice for our institutions, for our states, and for the nation. And then we will formally notify the White House of our pending trial and summon the President to answer the articles and send his counsel. So the trial will commence in earnest on Tuesday. But first, Mr. President, some important good news for the country. We anticipate the Senate will finish the USMCA tomorrow and send this landmark trade deal to President Trump for his signature. A major victory for the administration, but more importantly, for American families. So let me close with this. This is a difficult time for our country, but this is precisely the kind of time for which the framers created the Senate. I'm confident this body can rise above short-termism and factional fever and serve the long-term best interest of our nation. We can do this, and we must.
There you have it. The Senate Republican leader, Mitch McConnell, laying down the ground rules for how the Senate is going to conduct this trial over the next few days, calling it a difficult time for our country, echoing what Nancy Pelosi said, that this is a sad and tragic time for our country. Both sides emphasizing the solemnity of what is happening right now. And Mary Bruce, that is permeating Capitol Hill this afternoon.
George, there is no question the sense of the solemnness of this occasion, as you mentioned, is being felt on both sides, as is a fair amount of frustration, as we have seen building here over the last several months. Now, you, of course, just heard from the majority leader what comes next. We will hear from the House managers outlining the charges against the president tomorrow morning, that he abused his power and obstructed Congress by pressuring Ukraine to investigate his political rivals. And what comes next will be a proceeding unlike any other. All 100 senators will be forced to sit in their seats silently throughout the entire trial. No cell phones, no tablets, just listening and weighing this decision now before them, this momentous, historic decision. And there are still a lot of variables here, a lot of unknowns. Many Republicans and all of Democrats would like to hear from additional witnesses, would like to see additional documents and evidence be presented. It is still unclear whether they're going to be able to summon enough support to force the hand of the Republican leader. And it is especially unclear just how long this trial is now going to last, George.
What is also unclear is how President Trump will react in real time. We were drawing the parallels, John Carl, to the Clinton trial back 21 years ago. Now, the president had apologized to the country several times by the time the trial actually took place. It went on doing his other business, he even gave the State of the Union during the Senate trial 20 years ago. This president's set to give the State of the Union on February 4th. They hope the trial is done by then. Hard to imagine he's going to either apologize or stay silent during the trial.
Absolutely, George. There is no way that this president will remain silent during this trial. And the February 4th State of the Union address may well be during the proceedings. If it goes along the schedule that the White House hopes, that this is over in 2 weeks, then it won't be. But if we get to a situation where the Senate approves witnesses, this trial could quite easily extend beyond February 4th. And either way, he will be delivering that State of the Union address in the chamber, the House chamber that had voted just weeks earlier to impeach him.
Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi walking back to that chamber right now. Dan Abrams, we talked about the 100 senators in the room. They're going to have to abide by rules of decorum. One of the most difficult jobs in the room, the 101st man in the room, the Chief Justice of the United States, John Roberts.
And the big question is going to be, how big a role is he going to play here? I think that a lot of people, particularly I think many on the left, are hoping that Roberts is going to sort of be an activist justice there. And
it's just not in his nature.
It's not in his nature. It's not what Chief Justice Rehnquist did in the Clinton proceedings, and it's not what anyone expects that Chief Justice John Roberts would do either. There are going to be some interesting questions, though, because he is going to have to be making kind of moment-by-moment decisions. Every time there is a question asked that someone says it's beyond the scope or irrelevant, typically a judge would rule on that. In this case, in the end, the Senate could decide to be making those rulings each and every time. But can you imagine that? Is the Senate really going to have a vote on each and every objection to questions? Or are they going to defer to the Chief Justice and suddenly make him a more relevant player than maybe many are expecting?
That is going to be one of the big questions. Terry, we heard the Speaker of the House say it's a day of history. The leader, the Republican leader of the Senate, Mitch McConnell, saying it is a time to rise above petty factionalism. One of the things we're going to see tested over these next days and weeks is, can the Senate do that?
It is a question, and it is a combination, obviously, of history and this moment. History has taken hold of our present moment. Though all that ritual that we just saw and the ritual that we are about to see with the Chief Justice, that's put there by the framers, by Ben Franklin and James Madison and the others who drafted the Constitution. They put the Chief Justice of the United States in the chair as the presiding officer of an impeachment of a president to communicate the gravity of the situation to all involved, to the nation and certainly to the participants. And that begins to take hold of individual senators as this trial goes forward. I think Dan is absolutely right. The Chief Justice is going to be under a lot of pressure because this one is so much more contentious. Clinton fought the impeachment, but on agreed-upon facts and grounds. I don't think Donald Trump is going to do that at all, and he's not going to want his lawyers to do that. And so you will see this tension between the august proceedings and high ideals that are articulated by the leaders and a ferocious political fight to the death that impeachment represents.
The next step is noon tomorrow when the House managers will read those articles of impeachment in the Senate before the Chief Justice comes in at 2 o'clock to be sworn in and to swear the senators in for this Senate trial in the impeachment of Donald Trump. Well, of course, we're going to cover that live tomorrow. Our coverage will continue right here on ABC News Live right now. And, of course, there's going to be a full wrap-up tonight on World News Tonight with David Muir. Have a good afternoon.
This has been a special report from ABC News.
And you've just been watching a special report from ABC News on the article.